Yo, what's going on YouTube? It is your boy GZTV back with another video, and in this video we are going to be reviewing the first movie of a pretty famous franchise. We have the 1982 American supernatural horror film directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Steven Spielberg, Michael Grace, and Mark Victor from a story by Spielberg. So Spielberg and Tobe Hooper, obviously on paper, that is an amazing, team up. We have Poltergeist. This is one of the most infamous movies probably of the 80s, definitely of its time, and at the time people were calling this one of the best horror movies ever. Now I don't know how well that is how well that is aged up to this point, but it is still a pretty solid movie. So we're going to get into the plot and the critical reception, and then that's going to be the video. So this story follows Steve and Diane Freeling, who live in the planned community of Cuesta Verde, California. So Steve is a successful real estate agent, and Diane looks after their three children: 16-year-old Dana, 8-year-old Robbie, and 5-year-old Carol Ann. So that's kind of to set up the story, like the main characters. Late one night, Carol Ann inexplicably converses with the family's television set while it displays post-broadcast static. Obviously, like back then, late in the night, once it got to a certain point and people weren't broadcasting anything. This was really before like TV shows took up spots on TV, and they were like all live broadcast, only the new stuff. So yeah, at a certain point it would just go static, and the TV people would start talking to her. I guess it's kind of a weird storyline, but it works, I guess. So the next night she again fixates on the television, and a ghostly white hand emerges from the screen, followed by a violent earthquake. And it's kind of weird because did the earthquake happen to everyone else in the community, or was it just them? I don't. It's weird. A planned community. That is super interesting. It's a community for it's super strange. I don't know. There's a lot of peculiar things, but I guess that's what makes it unique, and that's what makes people appreciate it. So as the family is shaken awake by the quake, Carol Ann eerily intones "They're here," which is one of the most like iconic lines of the film, and this is when it feels really real. I guess I don't know. It's weird. So the following day is filled with bizarre events. A glass of milk spontaneously breaks for no reason. Silverware bends and furniture moves on its own. So this family is starting to slowly experience some paranormal things, some things that are obviously not normal, paranormal. So these phenomena initially seem benign, but soon grow sinister, and there's like some evil intent behind this like unseen force, I guess. It obviously sets up to be a pretty generic movie, but some of the stuff they do with it is pretty interesting, and the world it creates and the franchise that breeds off of this is So during a severe thunderstorm, the gnarled backyard tree seemingly comes alive again. Some pretty fantastic, pretty foolish things, but it is what it is. So a large limb crashes through the children's bedroom window, grabs Robbie, pulls him inside into the pouring rain, and attempts to devour him. Again, super silly, like 80s horror movie stuff, like pretty typical, of course. So while the family rushes outside to rescue Robbie, Carol Ann is pulled into a portal inside the closet that goes into this like weird world. I don't remember if they called it something. I don't know if it was like a parallel universe or something like that. She gets pulled in while the family isn't paying attention to her. So after saving Robbie from the tree, which got sucked into a tornado, the family frantically search for Carol Ann, only for her voice to come out from the television. And they kind of realize, she was talking about the TV people at the beginning, and now maybe she's become a part of them, and she's like in their little dimension. I don't know. It's super weird. A tornado and an earthquake happened in like 2 days. I don't know how the movie pulled that off, but whatever. So, parapsychologist Martha Lesh arrives with team members Ryan and Morty to investigate. It's just a classic horror film, like the expert comes and thinks they can solve the thing, but it like turns out to be bigger than what they planned on. So they determine there is a poltergeist intrusion involving multiple ghosts. It's pretty much like a haunting, but it's like more of a disturbance. It's more obnoxious than like a normal haunting or a spirit. So meanwhile, Steve learns from his boss Louis Teague that the Cuesta Verde development was built on a former cemetery, and the graves were moved to a nearby location. So there's some interesting history behind this area, and again, that's where things like hauntings, things like poltergeist can kind of come from. So yeah, he's kind of getting like an origin story, maybe that can explain what they've been experiencing at their house. So, um, so Dana and Robbie are sent away for safety, while Dr. Lesh calls in Tangina Barons, a spiritual medium that's like super tiny, and obviously Zelda Rubinstein. She's obviously dead now because she was like 60 when this film came out, or like 50 when this film came out. But she had an interesting life. It's an interesting casting by the show. So yeah, really cool. So Tangina determines the spirits are lingering in a different sphere of consciousness and are not at rest. It's a weird like thing she explains, and honestly, like 50 minutes into the film, I was sitting there like, can we just get to the point? And once they got to the point, it was definitely worth it. But I feel like this film lingers a little too long for what it is. I don't think it's a super complex storyline for it to be almost 2 hours. It would be 2 hours in a theatrical release, or a TV premiere too. It'd be over that. So they're attracted to Carol Ann's life force. She's almost like their, what do they call that? I can't think of that word. So Tangina also detects a dark presence she calls the Beast, who is restraining Carol Ann and manipulating her life force in order to prevent the other spirits from crossing over. This was like the evil force that kind of had like the sinister things going on. That's how she kind of explained it. So the entrance to the other dimension is in the children's bedroom closet and exits through the living room ceiling. So again, it's like a portal. It's like a black hole, like a wormhole, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the proper terminology would be for that. I feel like that's all just in theory, but Diane, secured by a rope, passes through the portal, guided by another rope previously threaded through both portals. So they like kind of throw a rope down and it comes out of the ceiling. Oh, tether. That's like the Carol Ann is kind of like the Beast's tether, to keep him alive or something. I don't know. Sorry if I'm like stuttering. I'm actually kind of tired. Like I woke up like 2 hours ago, so like I'm still kind of waking up a little bit. I just had a boring ass class that did nothing for me today. But Diane retrieves Carol Ann, and they drop through the ceiling to the living room floor, covered in ectoplasm, which is a thing pretty popular back then. It's like it's weird. It's like this, I don't know. It's weird. So as they recover from the ordeal, Tangina proclaims the house is clean of spirits now, which, I don't know, that's kind of weird. But shortly after, the Freeling family have nearly finished packing to move out of the house. They gotta move away from this area. It seems like cursed. That's like a classic thing to do in a horror movie. Before the family is to leave, Stephen goes to his office while Dana is on a date, leaving Diane at home with Robbie and Carol Ann. So the Beast ambushes Diane and the children, aiming for a second kidnapping attempt. Another strike by the little Beast guy, I guess. So the unseen force drives Diane to the backyard in the pouring rain, where she stumbles into the flooded swimming pool excavation. Which, yeah, they were going to put a swimming pool in when it got nicer out or whatever, but yeah, pushes her in there. Skeletal corpses in coffins float up around her in the muddy hole, and there's actually a really interesting fun fact about this skeletal corpses. I saw this on Twitter one day, and I was like, dang, actually, like, this is coming up on my schedule. I'm really excited to see this movie. The skeletons were real people, like actual dead corpses that were rotted, obviously. And they didn't tell her that until after they were filming, obviously, and it's fucking weird. That's why, like, film in the 1900s was just so weird, man. So many problems. But Diane crawls out and rushes back into the house. She rescues the children, and they escape to the outside as more coffins and bodies erupt on the ground. And at this point, it's like, this is foolish. Like, can you just end the movie? Like, this is so unnecessary. But Stephen, accompanied by Teague, arrives home to the mayhem and realizes that only the gravestones were relocated. The development was built over the abandoned graves, which I guess was an interesting kind of like plot twist later in the film, but at that point I didn't really care for it. I was kind of over the movie, like looking at my phone and stuff. So the Freelings jump into their car and collect Dana just as she returns home from her date. They flee Cuesta Verde as the house implodes into the portal while Teague and stunned neighbors look on. It's like, what the hell happened here? The family checks into a room in a motel where Stephen promptly removes the TV and obviously fears of something bad happening. So yeah, that's the plot. I feel like this is going to be a pretty long video. This is a pretty talking about movie, so let's just get into the review of this thing. So getting into kind of the review and the critical response and what people think, I mean, this is a really good movie by critics, and I think it is a pretty good movie too. I wasn't a huge fan when I first watched it. But then, like, looking back at some of the scenes, I realized, like, this is a pretty good movie, especially for its time. Now, I wouldn't say it's like a timeless movie, but it's still pretty good. It's a classic of the genre. One of the better films of its time. Um, Smartly filmed, tightly scripted, and most importantly, consistently frightening. Poltergeist is definitely a horror classic. Um, Really good movie. I mean, it's an effective thriller, not so much because of the special effects, which were pretty shitty. Not at the time, but now. As because Hooper and Spielberg have tried to see the movie Strange Events through the eyes of the family members, instead of just standing back and letting the special effects overwhelm the cast along with the audience. This seemed like a personable movie. This felt like something that had some soul with it, which is something that a lot of horror movies at the time of this type of pedigree kind of lacked, you know. So it's a marvelously spooky ghost story with extraordinary technical effects that were often eerie and beautiful, but also occasionally vividly gruesome. Really good movie, honestly. I mean, it's definitely good for its time. I mean, when Carol Ann is lost, the parents and the two older children come together in blood-kin empathy to form a larger-than-life family that will reach down to the gates. Okay, so OBS crashed. I don't know how much of that you guys got, but let's just continue on to the next thing, I guess. Weird. So, more things to say. I mean, buried within the plot of Poltergeist is a basic, splendid fairy tale scheme. The story of a little girl who puts her parents through the most outrageous tribulation to prove their love for her. Underlying most fairy tales is a common theme: the comforts of family. Virtually all fairy tales begin with a disrupting of the family order, and their conclusion is usually a return to order. So this movie does a good job at that. It kind of has some interesting underlying themes that you wouldn't understand on the surface. But yeah, I mean, it's a wondrous movie. It's a great movie for Spielberg as well. There's obviously some knacks to it that I don't like. I mean, it's very good at getting the details of suburban life right. In other words, it sets its stage beautifully. But when it comes, the scares are a little silly. It's not really that scary of a movie. I'm not like none of the movies from this time anyway are that scary. I mean, the film looks and feels decidedly patchy, as if it had been assembled by different hands, frequently working at cross purposes. There are definitely some patchy moments here. Some moments where it's like, okay, why is this here? You know, in terms of simple, flat-out, roof-rattling fright, Poltergeist gives full value. In terms of story, I don't know. I just don't. The story is kind of basic. Like, I know people sit here and hype up the story, but yeah, I don't know. It's quite lopsided at times too. It's still a really good film though. It's just there's definitely a couple. It's not flawless. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and just dick ride this movie and say it's like flawless or something, because that's not true. But leave a like, comment, subscribe. I know, kind of abrupt of an outro. I gotta get going. I gotta get this video posted. Do all that type of stuff. I got a couple homework assignments to do today. I have an Embiid video to record. So let's just get it moving, man. Why don't we?